The most dangerous mistake a man can make is believing the woman he left behind stayed exactly where he abandoned her. Ethan Walker stepped out of a black luxury sedan beneath the glowing lights of the New York Global Excellence Awards, wearing the confident smile of a man who thought life had rewarded every choice he had ever made. Beside him, Sabrina Collins adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist and leaned into his arm as cameras flashed from every direction. The marble entrance shimmered under golden chandeliers, and a line of photographers called Ethan's name as he climbed the steps toward the ballroom. Tonight wasn't just another gala. It was a celebration of success, influence, and power. And Ethan intended to enjoy every second of it. As they entered the grand hall, soft music drifted through the room while executives, celebrities, and investors filled tables covered in white roses and crystal glassware. The massive stage at the front displayed a rotating golden emblem announcing the evening's highest honor, the Visionary Award. Ethan glanced around the room, shaking hands and accepting congratulations. Everything felt exactly as it should. Then his eyes stopped on a familiar name printed on the guest list displayed near the entrance. Vanessa Brooks. For a moment, he thought it had to be a mistake. Then a slow smile crossed his face. Vanessa was here. After all these years, she had actually come. Sabrina noticed his expression. Someone you know, she asked. Ethan chuckled softly. Just someone from my past. He didn't say more. It didn't need to. In his mind, he could already imagine how the night would unfold. Vanessa would see him thriving. She would see the luxury, the attention, the success. She would see the woman now standing where she once stood. And whether she admitted it or not, she would understand that he had won. Around the ballroom, conversations shifted unexpectedly. Small groups whispered about a mysterious guest expected to arrive later that evening. Someone important. Someone whose name had been kept secret. Ethan barely paid attention. Whatever excitement the room was building toward couldn't possibly matter to him. Tonight was already perfect. Or so he believed. Because while Ethan Walker stood beneath the spotlight convinced he was the star of the story, he had no idea that the entire room was actually waiting for someone else. The longer people whispered about the mystery guest, the more the atmosphere inside the ballroom began to change. It started with small conversations between executives near the bar. Then it spread to the tables closest to the stage. Nobody seemed interested in discussing business deals anymore. They were all talking about the same thing. Someone important was coming. Someone whose identity had been protected even from many of the event organizers. Ethan noticed it now. Every few minutes, another guest checked the entrance. Another group lowered their voices and exchanged theories. Sabrina leaned closer and smiled. Whoever it is must be a celebrity. Ethan shrugged. Or someone trying too hard to look important. The orchestra played softly beneath the crystal chandeliers while servers moved through the room carrying silver trays filled with sparkling drinks. Yet even the elegant atmosphere could not hide the growing anticipation. Across the ballroom, two investors Ethan recognized stood discussing the evening's top award. He overheard only a few words. Visionary. Industry leader. Extraordinary growth. Record-breaking acquisition. Ethan frowned slightly. Those descriptions sounded less like a celebrity and more like a business powerhouse. Before he could think more about it, the master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage. The room gradually quieted. A warm spotlight illuminated the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, the host said with a smile, thank you for joining us tonight as we celebrate innovation, leadership, and vision. Applause rolled through the ballroom. The host continued speaking about the accomplishments of various nominees, but one detail immediately caught Ethan's attention. Every time the Visionary Award was mentioned, the winner's identity remained hidden. No photographs. No biography. No hints. Only praise. The mystery seemed intentional. Almost theatrical. Sabrina laughed softly. They are building suspense like it is an award show on television. Ethan forced a smile, but something felt unusual. Then another comment drifted through the room. A woman seated nearby whispered to her husband, "I heard the winner is a black female entrepreneur." A tense expression changed for only a second. Vanessa crossed his mind unexpectedly. He dismissed the thought almost immediately. It could not possibly be her. The woman he remembered had disappeared from every important room years ago at least, that was what he believed. Meanwhile, near the entrance, several event coordinators suddenly straightened their posture. Security personnel adjusted earpieces. A few photographers quietly relocated toward the front doors. The room did not notice yet. But something was about to happen. And for the first time that evening, Ethan Walker felt a strange sense that the night was beginning to move in a direction he could not control. Some words stay alive long after the people who speak them have forgotten. As the orchestra continued playing beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers, Ethan sat comfortably in his chair, unaware that a memory from years ago was quietly making its way back toward him. The ballroom buzzed with excitement, but Ethan barely listened. He was too busy enjoying the image he had built for himself. Success. Recognition. Admiration. Everything he had once wanted now seemed within reach. Yet there had been a time when none of those things existed. There had been a time when the future looked uncertain, bills piled up on the kitchen counter, and every dream felt one step away from falling apart. Back then, Vanessa Brooks had been standing beside him. She had worked long hours, often returning home after dark, carrying takeout containers because neither of them had the energy to cook. She had listened to his frustrations, encouraged his ambitions, and believed in plans that even he occasionally doubted. When opportunities failed, she stayed. When setbacks came, she stayed. When success felt impossible, she stayed. But people often reveal who they truly are when circumstances finally improve. As Ethan's career began gaining momentum, subtle changes appeared. New circles. New invitations. New people. Vanessa noticed them before he did. The late meetings became more frequent. The conversations became shorter. The promises became easier to break. Then one afternoon, sitting across from her in a lawyer's office, Ethan delivered the sentence that would remain with her for years. His voice had been calm. Almost indifferent. "Without me, you will disappear." Vanessa had stared at him in silence. Not because she believed him, but because she could not believe someone she had helped build could look at her that way. Ethan interpreted her silence as defeat. He mistook grace for weakness. He mistook dignity for dependence. Most of all, he mistook temporary circumstances for permanent reality. The divorce became final a few months later. Friends disappeared. Invitations stopped. Many people assumed Vanessa's story had ended the moment Ethan's success story began. And in a strange way, Ethan believed that too. Back in the ballroom, he lifted his glass and glanced toward the stage as another round of applause echoed through the room. It felt completely secure in the version of history he had created. Around him, conversations continued about the mysterious entrepreneur everyone seemed eager to meet. More photographers quietly gathered near the entrance. More executives checked their watches. More anticipation filled the air. Ethan noticed none of it. Because while he remembered the woman he had left behind, he had no idea what happened after she walked away from that lawyer's office. He never asked. He never looked. And soon, for the first time in years, he was about to discover that the people we underestimate are often the ones writing the most extraordinary chapters when nobody is watching. Success rarely looks dramatic when it begins. Most of the time, it looks like an empty apartment, an early alarm clock, and a person choosing not to quit. Years before the ballroom filled with whispers about a mysterious entrepreneur, Vanessa Brooks sat alone at a small kitchen table in a one-bedroom apartment overlooking a busy street in Brooklyn. Outside, sirens echoed in the distance and yellow taxis rolled through wet pavement. Inside, a single lamp illuminated stacks of paperwork spread across the table. The divorce had taken more than a marriage. It had taken stability, certainty, and many of the relationships she once believed would last forever. For weeks, her phone remained silent. People who once invited her to dinner suddenly became difficult to reach. Former colleagues who had praised her ideas now treated her like a footnote in someone else's success story. It would have been easy to become bitter. Easy to spend years proving someone wrong. But Vanessa made a different choice. Every morning before sunrise, she brewed coffee, opened her laptop, and focused on the only thing she could control, the next step. The first consulting contract she secured was worth less than many people spend on a weekend vacation. Yet she treated it as though it were the opportunity of a lifetime. She answered emails herself. Prepared presentations herself. Traveled across the city herself. Some days ended with victories. Many ended with rejection. Still, she kept going. Seasons changed. Winter snow became spring rain. Spring rain became summer heat. Slowly, clients returned calls. Referrals began appearing. One satisfied customer led to another. Then another. What separated Vanessa from many people was not talent alone. It was consistency. While others chased attention, she built trust. While others advertised success, she focused on results. Years passed before anyone outside her circle noticed what was happening. By then, the foundation had already been built. One afternoon, standing inside a modest office that measured less than 1,000 square feet, Vanessa looked around and realized she was no longer working alone. A small team had formed around her vision. They believed in her leadership because she had earned it. Not through promises. Through action. The company continued growing. New clients arrived from different states. Revenue increased. Partnerships expanded. Yet Vanessa rarely spoke about her past. She never mentioned Ethan during interviews. She never told reporters about the divorce. She never built her future around an old wound. Instead, she built it around purpose. Back in the Gala ballroom, guests continued speculating about the mysterious award winner while waiters moved quietly between tables. None of them knew the long road behind the success they were about to celebrate. None of them knew about the small apartment, the lonely mornings, or the years spent rebuilding a life one decision at a time. And sitting only a few yards away, Ethan Walker remained completely unaware that the woman he once expected to disappear had spent those same years becoming impossible to ignore. Not everyone who changes your life arrives with an introduction. Sometimes they arrive as a stranger sitting 3 tables away, quietly watching the world without asking anyone to notice them. For Vanessa Brooks, that moment happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning. The kind of morning most people would forget. The small coffee shop near her office smelled of fresh espresso and warm pastries. Outside, Manhattan moved at its usual pace, with crowded sidewalks and endless streams of traffic. Inside, Vanessa sat alone reviewing notes before an important client meeting. Her company was growing, but growth came with pressure. New opportunities meant bigger risks. Bigger decisions. Bigger responsibilities. She was studying financial projections when a sudden spill from a nearby table sent coffee across several documents. Before she could react, a man stepped forward with a stack of napkins. "I think those reports deserve a better morning than that," he said with a small smile. Vanessa laughed for the first time that day. The stranger introduced himself as Adrian Hayes. Nothing about him seemed remarkable at first glance. His clothes were simple. His watch was understated. He carried himself with the relaxed confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin. Most importantly, he treated Vanessa as though her success was already normal. Over the following months, their paths crossed unexpectedly several times. Sometimes at coffee shops. Sometimes at business events. Sometimes during conversations that lasted far longer than either of them planned. Unlike many people Vanessa had met after her company became successful, Adrian rarely asked about revenue, status, or achievements. He asked questions about ideas. About goals. About what motivated her to keep building. He listened more than he spoke. And when he did speak, his observations often revealed an understanding of business far deeper than he ever advertised. Vanessa found that unusual. Most successful people enjoyed reminding others how successful they were. Adrienne never seemed interested in doing that. One evening after a charity fundraiser, they walked several blocks through the city discussing leadership, family, and second chances. There was no attempt to impress. No effort to dominate the conversation. Used genuine curiosity. It was a feeling Vanessa had not experienced in years. Respect without conditions. Trust without pressure. As their relationship grew, she slowly learned pieces of Adrienne's story. He owned investments. He sat on corporate boards. He advised companies. Yet he spoke about those accomplishments the same way other people discussed the weather. Quietly. Without performance. Without ego. What Vanessa did not fully understand at the time was just how much influence Adrienne actually possessed. Back inside the Gala ballroom, guests continued exchanging rumors about the mysterious entrepreneur expected to arrive. Ethan remained focused on appearances, unaware of the invisible connections forming around him. Across the room, several executives checked messages and suddenly stood straighter. A few glanced toward the entrance with unmistakable excitement. The anticipation was growing stronger by the minute. And somewhere beyond those grand ballroom doors, the woman Ethan once underestimated was preparing to enter with the man he had never even heard of. The invitation arrived on a quiet Thursday afternoon. Vanessa had just finished a meeting with senior members of her leadership team when her assistant placed a black envelope on her desk. It stood out immediately. Thick paper. Gold lettering. Elegant. Intentional. The kind of invitation designed to make an impression before it was even opened. Vanessa studied it for a moment before sliding her finger beneath the seal. Inside it was a formal request to attend the New York Global Excellence Awards. She read the card once. Then again. Her expression remained calm, but her assistant noticed the slight pause. Everything okay? She asked. Vanessa nodded. Yes. Technically, that was true. Yet she understood something the others in the room did not. This invitation represented far more than an evening gala. It represented a return to a world that had once quietly closed its doors behind her. Later that evening, she sat beside Adrienne in their apartment overlooking the city skyline. The sun had disappeared behind the buildings, leaving the windows glowing with reflections of thousands of lights. Adrienne listened while she explained the invitation. When she finished, he placed his glass on the table and looked at her thoughtfully. Do you want to go? The question was simple. The answer was not. Vanessa stared out at the city for several seconds. Years earlier, she would have approached the decision differently. She might have worried about who would be there. What people would think. Withered old memories would resurface. But those years had changed her. I am not going because of anyone in that room, she finally said. Adrienne smiled. I know. I am going because I belong there. Those words settled into the silence between them. Not as a declaration. Not as an attempt to prove anything. Simply as truth. Over the next few days, preparations quietly unfolded. There were no dramatic conversations. No discussions about revenge. No interest in making anyone jealous. Vanessa selected a gun with the same approach she used when making business decisions, elegant, confident, and understated. Adrienne remained exactly as he always was. Calm. Supportive. Unconcerned with appearances. Yet small clues continued revealing themselves. Phone calls from influential people. Messages from executives whose names regularly appeared in financial publications. Invitations arriving from organizations most people could never access. Vanessa noticed them, but she respected Adrienne enough not to pry into details he rarely volunteered. Back inside the ballroom, the anticipation had reached a new level. The host continued introducing categories while guests exchanged increasingly confident predictions about the secret award recipient. Security. Personnel remained near the entrance. Event organizers checked schedules repeatedly. Several prominent executives who had arrived hours earlier now stood near the front of the room as though waiting to greet someone important. Ethan noticed the movement. So did Sabrina. Neither understood what it meant. Then the grand doors at the far end of the ballroom slowly opened. Conversations faded. Heads turned. Even the orchestra seemed quieter. For a brief moment, the entire room focused on a single point. And the woman everyone had been waiting for finally stepped into the light. The difference between confidence and shock is often only a few seconds. One moment, Ethan Walker was comfortably seated among influential guests, convinced he understood exactly how the evening would unfold. The next, every assumption he carried began quietly falling apart. As the grand ballroom doors opened, conversations dissolved into silence. The soft music continued, but it seemed distant now. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the entrance. Ethan followed their gaze. At first, he simply saw a woman stepping into the light. Then recognition hit him. Vanessa. For a brief moment, he wondered if he had made a mistake. The woman entering the ballroom looked familiar, yet completely different from the person stored in his memory. She moved with calm confidence, neither hurried nor hesitant. There was no attempt to command attention, yet attention followed her anyway. The elegant gown she wore reflected the warm glow of the chandeliers. Her posture communicated something far more powerful than wealth. It communicated certainty. The certainty of someone who no longer needed approval. Around the room, photographers immediately raised their cameras. Flashbulbs began exploding across the ballroom. Several executives who had remained seated all evening suddenly stood. Others moved closer to greet her. Ethan watched as one respected investor crossed half the room just to shake her hand. Another followed. Then another. Sabrina noticed it too. Why are they all going to her? She whispered. Ethan did not answer. Because he did not know. The strange feeling that had been growing inside him throughout the evening suddenly became impossible to ignore. Vanessa smiled politely as people welcomed her. She greeted each person with warmth, but never lingered. She did not appear surprised by the attention. She appeared accustomed to it. That realization unsettled Ethan more than he wanted to admit. Across the ballroom, the master of ceremonies stepped away from a conversation and personally approached Vanessa. Guests nearby exchanged excited whispers. The mystery entrepreneur. The secret guest. The anticipated arrival. Pieces began fitting together in ways Ethan had not expected. Yet one question remained unanswered. Then another figure entered through the doors behind Vanessa. The room reacted immediately. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But noticeably. Conversations stopped again. Several corporate leaders straightened their posture. Two board chairmen exchanged glances. A senior executive from a Fortune 500 company walked forward with an expression that looked almost respectful. The man beside Vanessa carried himself with quiet ease. No security entourage. No grand entrance. No performance. Yet somehow, everyone important in the room seemed to know exactly who he was. Ethan narrowed his eyes. He had never seen him before. Sabrina leaned closer. Who is that? Ethan shook his head. For the first time all evening, he genuinely felt lost. Meanwhile, Vanessa and the stranger continued walking toward the center of the ballroom. Side by side. Comfortable. Natural. As though they belonged exactly where they were. And while Ethan struggled to understand why the room seemed captivated by their arrival, the biggest revelation of the night had not even happened yet. The room did not erupt all at once. The reaction came in waves. First came recognition. Then surprise. Then something even more powerful. Respect. Vanessa and Adrian had barely reached the center of the ballroom when the master of ceremonies returned to the stage with a smile that suggested he had been waiting all evening for this moment. The spotlight shifted across the room and settled near their table. Every conversation faded. Every eye focused forward. Ladies and gentlemen, the host began, it is my honor to introduce tonight's recipient of the Visionary Award. A giant screen illuminated behind him. Images of groundbreaking projects, community initiatives, and rapidly expanding businesses appeared one after another. The audience watched carefully. Ethan leaned forward. Sabrina sat motionless beside him. Then the final image appeared. Vanessa Brooks. For a second, the ballroom seemed frozen. The screen displayed her achievements while the audience rose to its feet in a standing ovation. Applause thundered across the room. Cameras flashed continuously. Vanessa smiled with quiet grace, visibly grateful but never overwhelmed. Ethan stared at the stage in disbelief. The woman he had once dismissed was being celebrated by the very people whose approval he had spent years trying to earn. Yet the evening was not finished. Not even close. As Vanessa prepared to walk toward the stage, the host raised a hand. Before she accepts this award, there is one more guest who deserves recognition tonight. He turned toward Adrian. A ripple moved through the audience. Several executives immediately began clapping before the introduction even started. Ethan noticed it. So did Sabrina. The host continued. Entrepreneur, investor, chairman, and founder of Hayes Global Holdings, one of the most influential investment groups in the country, please welcome Adrian Hayes. The reaction was immediate. Some guests exchanged shocked glances. Others smiled knowingly. Ethan felt the color drain from his face. Suddenly, pieces that never seemed important now connected perfectly. The respect. The attention. The anticipation. The way powerful people had greeted him. Adrian was not simply successful. He was one of the most influential figures in the room. Then came the final blow. During the introduction, the screen displayed recent business headlines. One article in particular captured everyone's attention. Vanessa's company had recently completed a strategic acquisition involving a major consulting group that Ethan had spent months pursuing as a potential partner. The deal was already done. The opportunity was gone. And Vanessa now sat on the side of the table where decisions were made. Ethan lowered his eyes toward his untouched drink. Across the ballroom, Vanessa and Adrian exchanged a calm smile before walking toward the stage together. Neither said a word to him. They did not need to. The entire room already understood what Ethan was only beginning to realize. Applause filled the ballroom long after Vanessa accepted the award. People stood smiling, cameras continued flashing, and conversations buzzed with admiration. Yet for Vanessa, the most meaningful part of the evening had nothing to do with trophies, headlines, or recognition. It was the quiet realization that she no longer needed any of it to feel complete. Standing on the stage beneath the warm lights, she thanked her team, her mentors, and the people who believed in her vision when success was still uncertain. Her speech was brief. Graceful. Focused on gratitude rather than achievement. When she finished, another standing ovation swept through the room. Adrian watched from nearby with a proud smile. Not because Vanessa had won an award, but because she had become exactly who she was always capable of becoming. As the evening drew to a close, guests gathered throughout the ballroom discussing business opportunities and future partnerships. Vanessa stepped away from a conversation near the stage and made her way toward the exit. That was when she heard a familiar voice behind her. Vanessa. She turned. Ethan stood a few feet away. For a moment, neither spoke. Years earlier, she might have felt anger. Regret. I need to prove something. But standing there now, she felt none of those things. Ethan offered a small smile. The confidence that had defined him earlier in the evening was gone. In its place was something quieter. Reflection. Congratulations, he said. You have done incredibly well. Vanessa nodded politely. Thank you. Another silence followed. Ethan seemed as though he wanted to say more. Perhaps he wanted to revisit the past. Perhaps he wanted to explain himself. Perhaps he wanted to understand how everything had changed. But some questions arrived too late for answers to matter. Vanessa extended her hand. Ethan shook it. The gesture was simple. Respectful. Final. Then Adrienne joined her side. Together, they headed toward the ballroom doors. No dramatic farewell. No speech about revenge. No attempt to make Ethan feel small. The moment did not need any of that. Because the truth was already visible to everyone who had witnessed the evening. Ethan had spent years believing success meant leaving someone behind. Vanessa had spent those same years learning that true success meant becoming someone new. As the doors opened and the city lights stretched across the night beyond them, Vanessa walked forward without looking back. The room would remember the award. The headlines would remember the business success. But the real victory was something much quieter. She did not return to reclaim the man who underestimated her. She returned as the woman who no longer needed his approval. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge is not making someone regret losing you. It is showing them that you never lost yourself.